Hi, my name is Kathleen Short. I'm a wood turner and I'm going to give you a little tour of the shop that I have created in my garage. So it's about 10.5 feet by 10.5 feet that I've appropriated for myself, and let's go on a little tour. Here's my shop in the garage. I have a dust collector and a Canadian made general lathe. It's pretty big. It's actually bigger than I need, but I like it. I got a really good deal on it, and it has some really cool history for me anyways. No matter how much you clean, you will always have sawdust everywhere. I have all of my wood stored on shelves, and all of this is dry wood. It was when I got it. Most of it is donated. Friends will cut down a tree, donate some wood, I let it dry out. I also have a really good friend, my mentor, who has a house full of wood, and she's very gracious sharing it with me. There's my workbench where I do a lot of the work. It's an IKEA kitchen counter that I purchased a few years ago, and it actually is perfect. There's the bowl I worked on the other day. It's just drying right now. That's the tung oil I use. I'm not promoting any products. That's just what I use because it was handy. My grinding machine, my drill press, a whole bunch of other little things that I need. Today I'm going to turn a small maple bowl, and these are the tools I've laid out that I'm going to be using to work with my lathe. So let's get started. This is the maple blank that I'm going to be using to turn wood. Somebody's already drilled a hole in the middle of it. I believe it came that way for me. And this is the chuck that I will be using. I will attach this to the lathe and then screw on the chuck, and we can start working. If you're curious to know why I have braces on my hands, it's to keep my thumbs from overextending. I'm a little too flexible and have arthritis, so working with the wood hurts my hands if I don't have these thumb guards. Because it's a square piece of wood, I'm actually going to use my bandsaw to cut the edges off, the corners off, so that it's round and it'll take me less time to turn it on the lathe. I've cut down the piece of wood to mostly round. It's been attached to the lathe using a screw chuck, and we're going to start turning. I wear a face shield when I turn. I also use an old pair of glasses that helps me focus a little bit more on the piece. Safety is a big priority, so this is it. I'm probably a little bit muffled. Hopefully you can still hear me, or I might just edit the audio after the video is done. This is the tool rest, one of the most important parts of the lathe. It's what you'll rest your tool on, as well as a barrier between you and the wood. You can rest your hand on it, and it helps you guide your tool along the piece of wood. The tool rest is also adjustable. You'll need to move it depending on which tool you're using and what action you're doing with your turning. And you always want to make sure that your wood is far enough away from the tool rest that it doesn't hit. You could damage your piece of wood, and you could damage your tool rest. When you've turned your piece round, you can bring your tool rest a little closer. You don't want the tool rest to be too far. Otherwise, as you're turning, your tool might get stuck and you could have a really bad accident. So anytime you take a little bit of bulk off your wood, bring your tool rest a little bit closer, as close as you can, and then continue turning. One piece of advice that's really important for all turners is to turn the lathe off before you move the tool rest. It's really important because you might end up moving the tool rest while the wood is turning, hitting it in error. You'll end up with a big gouge. You might ruin your piece. You could hurt yourself very badly as well. So always turn your lathe off. Once it's stopped, move your tool rest to the position you want, then start the lathe again and start turning. This is the outside of the bowl so far. I've turned the foot. This is the foot part. This is what is going to sit in a different chuck so that I can finish the outside and clean out the inside to make the inside of the bowl. I'm just going to do a little bit. So we have the Nova chuck on. This is our piece of wood with the foot. I'm just going to screw the foot on there. And I like to label everything. So I do have a T with an arrow that tells me which way to turn to tighten the chuck. I have another chuck that actually tightens in the opposite direction. There are two places where you can tighten it, and I do tighten in both. And now our piece of wood is securely attached to the lathe, and we are going to turn the inside. So the tool rest is going to sit just a little bit below center, and that will give better ease for the tool. When the tool is used, it will sit at center and cut. Always make sure that there's clearance, and on we go. I like my little tool a little bit better. This is the outside of the maple bowl, and we've cleaned out the inside of the maple bowl. Right now I'm going to give it sanding and make it all smooth. The sanding paper that I have is discs. They attached with Velcro to my drill, and I always start, well, I don't always start with the same grit, But in this case, I'm going to start with 120, move up to 150, 180, 220, and then I end with 320. The bowl's now been sanded using the first grit, 120. I used it to remove the tear out and some of the big scratches. I've also used it to shape the bottom a little bit. While I sand, I always wear a face mask, and I do have the dust collector on. That's that black thing with the mesh around it. It does suck some of the dust out of the air and makes it easier to breathe. The next step is to increase the grit and sand out the scratches from the previous grit. It's always good to increase the grit only by half of the previous number. So I could do 120, then 180 and 320, but I like to use 150 and 220 in between. I find it gives it a smoother finish. So the bowl has been sanded to 320. I'm going to add 2 burn marks along the rim. I've made little notches using a skew chisel, and now I'm going to use my wire to burn in an accent rim. One and 2. And whew, the smoke is crazy, and that adds a really pretty accent to the bowl. Now that we've finished the outside of the bowl and the inside, we're going to remove the foot using a different chuck. So I will just remove this piece of wood from there and add a different chuck. These are cold jaws, so they will either grasp the wood from the inside or the outside, depending. I think we can make it on the outside. I just have to adjust these rubber knobs. The pretty little bowl is now attached to the cold jaws by the outside. The rubber knobs are holding it together. We are going to turn this foot off and make a pretty bottom.
No battery.
Always make sure that you can turn it. And the cold jaws are very handy to have, but you have to be very careful when you're turning that you don't get your hands caught. Make sure that your hands are always on this side of the tool rest, not this side. We're going to use our 3/8 inch gouge, and we're always make sure that the middle is actually more indented than the rim. Otherwise you're going to have a wobbly bowl. So I like to just put a straight edge and just see that this needs to be removed a little bit more. You can do it by turning or sanding, depending. Here is our almost finished little maple bowl. I just have to sign the bottom. I can either do it by a pen, or I like to actually burn my signature in there, like I did with this spalted maple. I have a little burning kit, and that's what I'm going to use to sign this little maple bowl. This is the set I use to do my signature burn, and the handle is actually made by my friend Christine. There's lots of different burning kits out there. Use the one that suits you best. This one is perfect for what I need to do. And there it is. I'd like to date my pieces just so that I have a little bit of a history as to when each piece was done. Now, a lot of people don't like to date them. If they want to sell them, they feel that it reduces the value of the bowl in some way, and I don't. So the next part of the finishing touch is actually to put finish on it. My trusty videographer is not here at the moment, but I wanted to show you the difference between a side that has a little bit of oil on it and the side that doesn't. You can see the sheen. It darkens the wood a little bit. That's normal even with a clear coat. I actually like the darker side, and I'm going to finish the bowl and show you the finished product. Here's our little bowl. It has one coat of the tung oil on it. I use tung oil, like I mentioned earlier, just because it's convenient for me. I can find it anywhere. I've also used wipe-on poly and the Copsum wax for salad bowls. Whatever suits you best is good. After it dries for 24 hours, I use a non-abrasive little scrub pad. It removes any little pieces of roughness that might be left behind from the coat of oil. And I do that 3 times. So 3 coats of oil, 3 scrubs, and then I might add a little bit of polish with the BL system. But that's a personal choice. It depends what I'm going to use the bowl for, or if I want it shinier. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed my video on how to turn a little maple bowl. Have a good day.